Nigeria Airlines have increased fares for domestic flights to at least 80,000 naira over the rising cost of aviation fuel and foreign exchange crisis. Investigation by Arise News shows that some airlines hiked fares for trips from Lagos to Kano, Kaduna from about 60,000 naira to 100,000 naira. Flights from Abuja to Lagos went as high as 80,000 naira, while a return journey is now 85,000 naira. From Port Harcourt to Kano, prices are pegged at about 85,000 naira. The increase in fares is a result of the multiple challenges in Nigeria's air travel sector, including a surge in the prices of aviation fuel, which is significantly affecting operations.
Meanwhile, domestic airlines reportedly lose at least 4.3 billion naira annually due to their inability to operate 24-hour flights daily to the airports of their choice. Addressing aviation correspondent George Iresi, the chief operating officer of Ibom Air, says such restrictions have led to underutilization of fleets by airlines. In a presentation, Iresi said the country's carriers were losing an average of 4 million naira per flight, 360 million naira in 90 flights, and about 4.3 billion naira annually to sunset airport operations. He's appealing to the government to prioritize airfield infrastructure and provide the necessary instrument landing system.
Now, to discuss the challenges in Nigeria's aviation sector, we're joined from our Lagos studio by Alex Nwaba, the President, Aircraft Owners and Pilot Association of Nigeria. Mr. Nwaba, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with the crisis in the aviation sector. Hearing from the Aviation Minister, Hadi Sirika, he says, and I quote, "No immediate solutions to the current crisis in the aviation sector." It almost paints a hopeless picture, at least for now. What are your thoughts?
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for having me on the studio again. It's a pleasure to be here. The minister says there are no immediate solutions, and that's a fact. You can't fix a long-term problem overnight, but there are actually solutions available. Take for one, there are several refineries in the domestic market that have no crude that can very quickly ramp up to produce Jet A, which is the challenge the airline industry is facing in Nigeria. They've been trying for 2 years to get crude oil. And if they had that crude oil, they'll be able to produce locally and address some of the challenges we have with the importation of crude. So there are some solutions available, but we have to look more in the medium to long term because this problem's been around quite a while. And so in solving those problems, we have to increase domestic production of petroleum products and rely less on importation, which is the challenge we're currently facing.
Indeed. I mean, we know there are multiple factors at play when it comes to the increased fare we are witnessing. The fuel prices, as we do not produce and rely on imports so much, forex, inflation, but a 60% to 100% jump in airfare tickets. Is that justifiable?
Well, I guess you haven't seen the 200,000 naira fare between Abuja and Maiduguri that was available today on one carrier. The reality is that if you look at it, it's multifaceted. On the one level, you have the naira, it's jumped 50% in the very short period. You have fuel prices jumped 50%, and so the combination of this with other costs to the carriers, they have to pay more for spare parts, they have to pay more for fuel, they have to pay more for everything. These costs must be passed on in some manner because no one is stepping in to solve these problems at the moment. The result is that one airline has folded up on its own, not folded essentially, but they've stopped the domestic operations with regards to air flights for passengers. Another has been shut down by the government for inability to make some payments across the board, and others are being threatened. So one way or the other, something has to give. Like I said, it's either fares go up or airlines go out of business.
So, 30% of airlines' expenditure actually goes into aviation fuel. And we're hearing again that it's some wealthy Nigerians actually smuggling Jet A1, that's aviation fuel, to West Africa. And that's according to a Senate panel, one of the findings there. So, artisanal refineries a lot has been said about the need to license them because, after all, up until now, they've been closing the gap, in aviation fuel supply until, of course, they were shut down. How do you think, we can really work around this to ensure that the aviation sector does not totally collapse?
Well, let's get the facts right. In the past, you had individuals on a private basis, not through unofficial channels, producing diesel, not jet fuel. And they were cutting into the pipelines and therefore reducing the available product for export, which obviously had a drain on the production that Nigeria was not able to meet any of its quotas. The government has clamped down on those individuals, and so the idea is that you have more fuel to export, and then by that you would then be able to trade that and bring in some products. Jet fuel is not being produced in the local market. The refiners have been licensed, refineries have been built, but for years they have not been able to get crude oil to process. So that's one challenge that exists and something that can be addressed in the short term. Jet fuel production is just a slight variation from kerosene production, so it is possible to produce it locally, as well as the fact that all the jet fuel coming into Nigeria doesn't come off the ships and go to the airplane. They go through an inspection process. So obviously, if we're able to produce jet fuel within the Nigerian market, the same inspection and checking processes can be used to verify that the products being loaded onto airplanes are safe. And so we have to go back to solving that problem in the short term, but look more medium and long term. The world also is looking to vegetables to produce jet fuel. You have what is called SAF, subsidy aviation fuel. That will be a medium to long term solution that's available even to us if we seize the opportunity to put in place what we need to achieve that in the medium to long term. These problems are not insurmountable. We just need to resolve ourselves to quickly addressing them. We don't need a crisis to actually start to deal with these issues.
And in the midst of all of this, in the course of the week, the federal government approved the leasing of aircraft, 3 aircraft to be precise, a mix of Airbus and Boeing as lease for the national carrier Nigeria Air. What are your thoughts? How much of a reprieve would this be to the aviation sector?
Well, I'd like to see the magic that goes with that. These airplanes will come in on wet lease into the same market, have to pay these fuel prices, which, by the way, I didn't address. It used to be that fuel was 40% of the cost of airline operations. It's now closer to 90%. And so that's just fuel alone. And then airlines have to contend with the exchange rate for dollars that they can't get from the central bank. That gets loaded on top of it. So, first of all, let's break this problem down. The purpose of the national carrier is not to provide short-term reprieve for the passengers, because the national carrier, in the way it's formulated or any formulation, would not address the fact that prices have to go up because the national carrier would also have to buy jet fuel and also have to source aviation fuel. The bigger problem is the aim of the national carrier is to provide an airline Nigerians can be proud of, which creates jobs in the industries, which provides training to professionals in the industry. And so the approach now of going and establishing the national carrier on the basis of a wet lease arrangement, and a wet lease essentially means you get an airplane from a foreign carrier along with the crews. So by that action, we don't provide any real employment in the marketplace. We don't expand the aviation industry. We create a false sense of value in the marketplace because that operation cannot address the challenges that the industry faces. And so those industry challenges must be taken on as well. So the national carrier will not solve that problem. I think it would actually exacerbate the problem because it would greatly damage the existing domestic airline industry.
Are you saying Nigeria is not ready for Nigeria Air, is not ready for a national carrier? And there's this 700 million that's supposed to be received for takeoff. What are the guarantees?
Nigeria is ready for a national carrier properly structured. The government has said that they would only own 5%, but clearly all the actions show that they're actually 100% operator, even though 5% under government control is effective control of the airline. But the fact remains that what we need to focus on is building a national carrier that Nigerians truly can be proud of, that addresses the challenges in the marketplace, that provides a means for Nigerians to fly around the world and be proud to fly on a Nigerian flag carrier. We have that with existing private carriers. So whatever we intend to do must surpass what we are doing in the existing space. not to replicate it or damage it. And so the current idea of going with wet leased aircraft, and then, by the way, the idea is to wet lease 2 types of aircraft for 3 operations. No carrier that is well thought through would take that kind of approach. So clearly, we are not actually doing this to solve the problem. We're doing this to meet deadlines that we've already skipped for some time now.
Very quickly, before we let you go, clarify this, because the aviation minister, speaking after the Federal Executive Council meeting on Wednesday, did say the business plan proposed to the government is a 51 to 49% ownership. 51% Nigerians have, 51% everybody can come on board. Because it was asked the question, why are we leasing aircraft when we have moribund companies who could just, we can take up their airlines? And he said, well, it's 51%, it's open to everybody.
Well, has anybody actually seen the process for anybody to take on the 51%? The plan is that 5% will go to the government, 46% will go to Nigerians. We haven't quite defined what that group of Nigerians in a public manner, and the balance will go to foreign ownership. The question really is, what role is foreign ownership doing? Is it bringing capital to the process? So we then need to define that and have them bring that capital so we can do these things the right way, rather than this approach of a wet lease arrangement, which is some kind of stopgap measure. Why do we need a stopgap measure? Why don't we just go straight to getting this thing done right, since we've been at it for so long going forward? So yes, 51% will be in the hands of Nigerians. We need to actually define how Nigerians get hold of the 46% available to them, rather than to say 51% belongs to Nigerians. Which Nigerians? Is there a process for Nigerians to take up shares? Recently, Nigerians were asked to take up shares of MTN, and there was a public offering through the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Has that been done with respect to the national carrier? So it's 5% determining where everything goes, which if the government wants to run an airline, it's at liberty to do that. But we can't create an impression that we're creating an airline owned by Nigerians that we don't even know how, as a Nigerian, we can own shares in that company.
We'll have to say thank you very much for joining us, Alex.
Nwaba.
Yes, Nwaba. Thank you very much for joining us on Newsnight tonight.